In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. Hanging on and joining us today on the Real Leaders Podcast. Today we have on special guest Kuda Biza. Kuda, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. How you doing, Kevin?
Fantastic. It's great to see you again. Kuda was a guest on episode 77, as he is the co-founder with Brian Janesco of Nunbelievable. The cookie company has got social responsibility baked into its core mission, inspired by Nuns. Incredible company. Now, before we begin this interview today, folks, just want to make sure you all know what you're watching this platform or this podcast on. This platform is called Crowdcast. We've asked Kuda to come on, and the cool part about Crowdcast is you can ask him questions in this chat box on the right. There's a little link that kind of flew up there. We've got our team listening, making sure they're taking note of all those questions. So if you have any for Kuda throughout this interview today, feel free to ask your questions. Folks, if you don't want to miss another interview, you can either follow us on LinkedIn. We stream all these live to LinkedIn, or make sure, there's a link up there. Just subscribe to the Real Leaders Podcast. This episode is going to be edited. We'll probably edited late night tonight, Kuda. Late night, going to put in some work, and it's going to be uploaded tomorrow morning. How about that? So if you want
burning the midnight oil,
exactly. So if you want to listen to this podcast when it's edited, you want to make sure you never miss another episode with a Real Leader. Make sure you hit that link and subscribe to the Real Leaders Podcast. Lastly, folks, what keeps this show going, it's just so we can get more people unlike Kuda on the show. Leave a review. Let us know what you think, what you can expect, what others can expect when they come to the channel, and how we can improve. Really helps us out and keeps this show going. With that being said, folks, let's get this show on the road. Here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today is co-founder of Nunbelievable and the author of the S.P.E.A.R Method, 5 simple steps to balance success and fulfillment. Kuda Biza. Kuda Biza, how you doing?
I'm doing great. So, Kevin, you need to know about the S.P.E.A.R Method, dance. So, whenever you see me do it, it's about the S.P.E.A.R Method.
Hey, that's I can get that dance going on. We can start that here in San Diego. I've seen that a few times. I'm just going to come up and make sure they got their form right, make sure they got their aim.
And it goes on with any beat. So any beat, you're good to go.
Yeah, that's good. And it originated in Zimbabwe, right? Is that right?
Yeah, it originated in Zimbabwe in my mind. And now it's manifested into a dance, into a book, and so many different things.
I love it. Well, Kuda, one of the quotes, and just for folks listening to this, Kuda sent me his book back in November, and I had a chance to kind of go through it. A lot of these books I get sent, and I'll read halfway through it. Make sure I tell the podcast guest, "Hey, read through your book. We did a good job." This one, Kuda, I'm going to be honest with you, I read all the way through. It didn't take long at all. It was a great read, and it's about the S.P.E.A.R Method: seeking your why, planning, executing, achieving, and then repeating those steps. But there's a quote in there, Kuda. A quote comes from Abraham Lincoln. He says, "Give me 6 hours to chop a tree, and I'm going to spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." So the S.P.E.A.R Method, Kuda, the first question today is, how long did it take you to sharpen the blade? How did you do it? What did you do?
Yeah, so I think the true answer is it obviously took me my lifetime, right, to really understand and manifest the S.P.E.A.R Method. But it was really 4 to 5 years where I really spent a lot of time thinking about this framework and ultimately turning it into a book that I've now shared. So the trigger point was, in 2015 when my sister passed away, and I flew back to Zimbabwe. She had been suddenly, beaten by a dog with rabies, and in a matter of days, she went from, her normal self, life is normal, and she's in the hospital fighting for her life, and then obviously she passed away. So when I was at her memorial, that's when I started asking questions, like, was she happy? Was she fulfilled? Did she get to accomplish all the things that she wanted to in her life? And then it made me really think about my own life and my own direction. And an epiphany hit me at that moment, which was I was obviously spending a lot of time chasing success, right? I was in corporate America at the time, working on a big initiative, managing a very big e-commerce business and really driving a lot of growth. But I was, not really paying attention to some of the things that I knew would give me fulfillment. So I started on this journey of really understanding how can you balance the two, right? How can you balance success and fulfillment? Because there are stories we hear every day of miserable billionaires, right? People who have all the success in the world, but they're not happy. But I think the ultimate failure in life is when you achieve success, but you don't get any fulfillment. And Tony Robbins came up with that quote to say, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. So in my mind, I was like, hey, I'm probably not the only one who's struggling with this issue. Some people might not even recognize that it's something that they're not looking at. But if I could go on a journey and really discover what would it take for you to then achieve both success and fulfillment, and then turn it into a book and share it with the world, I think I might be able to inspire millions of people, not only to become successful, but to attain fulfillment.
Yeah. Now, we had a guest on the show who was a positive psychologist, Kuda. And I think what you're saying right there is like his definition of happiness was like success working toward fulfillment. So like as you continue to strive toward fulfillment and working toward that, that's what happiness is, I guess. So those kind of correlate in that sense. What's happiness to you, and when did you realize what you're doing is most fulfilling for people listening to this?
Yeah. So happiness for me has really been framed by the experiences that, I experienced growing up in Zimbabwe, in the US, and all the other travels that I've had. And it's really to make a difference in other people's lives. So whenever I'm making a difference and impacting people's lives in a positive way, I become happy. So it's coming from that sense of gratitude where not only am I gracious of what I have, but I'm applying the skills, the knowledge, the resources that I have to make a difference in other people's lives. Because I'm not blind to the fact that I've been blessed, right? To come from where I am, to be where I am today. It definitely takes a lot of grace and blessing upon that. So how can I also be a blessing to mankind? And when I do that every single day, it gives me happiness. And it's really shaped a lot of the things that I do now, even in my professional career. So earlier I had mentioned I was, working in a big Fortune 500 company. I decided to quit that job and start working on Nunbelievable, because although I could be successful in the corporate world, which, at that time I wanted to be successful in an area where I knew I was being fulfilled in the work that we do. So with Nunbelievable, as an example, we donate a meal for every cookie that we sell. So every single thing that I'm doing to chase success gives me fulfillment, because the more cookies we sell, the more people we feed, right? So the more lives we change. So and for me personally, that gives me happiness, knowing that I'm using my talents, my knowledge, and my skills to make other people's lives a better life for them to experience.
So here we are, seeking our why. Let's help people understand how to identify those areas that you need to work on to have that joy through this improvement.
Yeah. So one of the things I discovered with the S.P.E.A.R method was that there are 5 steps for you to achieve balanced success and fulfillment. And the first step is seeking your purpose, seeking your why, your calling in life. Because if you're living your life, but you're living someone else's calling, you're never going to be fulfilled. Because the thing that will give you fulfillment is you pursuing your purpose. So that is the first critical step in the S.P.E.A.R method. Because think of life as a journey, right? You have to get to a specific destination. But if you're living your life when you don't even know what destination you need to go to, you're never going to be happy regardless of where you arrive at, because you didn't have that set destination in the beginning. So it's super important for you to take the time to actually understand, hey, what is my purpose? What is my calling? and what is my why. And for a lot of people, this is a journey that is maybe tough, right? It's like, hey, I don't know my purpose. I don't know how to find my purpose. And in the book, I provide a couple of steps on how you could do it. One of the methods that I talk about, it was a method that was actually taught to me, where you send out an email to 5 people that know you really well, and you ask them one question, which is, what makes me unique? Because usually you would find that your life's purpose is really found in a unique gift that you have. So I did the same thing. And when I started getting the responses, I started seeing some commonality in all the responses. So I was able to quickly then see, like, okay, I really think that this is my purpose. And then I started digging deeper into it and found that, okay, this is my purpose. And for some, it's easier than others, right? Because you might have really good self-awareness and you really know yourself really well. So you might not have to go through of a deeper exercise like others have to. But I think that's the first critical step. You really need to know your why, because that really then gives you the purpose that you're trying to pursue in your life.
That's when I knew this book had me hooked. Is I read that note that your mentor had passed on to you to reach out to those 5 different people. I just sent some text messages out. What makes me unique? 5 different people, different stages in my life. And beforehand, I had written down what I thought was my values and my skills. Mm-hmm. Then when I got that feedback back, I was able to see where they aligned, and my why had never become clear in my life.
That's great.
Once I had understood that, I go, oh my gosh, the doors have now opened and the focus becomes so much more clear to me. Now, setting a plan with a clear destination now is much easier. So maybe talk about the plan aspect of this. And I'd love to share kind of my takes and feedback from the book. But how does one plan to execute and prepare for this journey?
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned in life, especially when I was in college, because I double majored in aviation and in business. In business, we would learn every business needs to have a business plan. In aviation school, in the flight program, we'd hear every flight needs to have a flight plan. So for me, I quickly deduced every life has to have a plan. Now, a couple of things that I just want to touch on before we really go into the meat of your question is that we need to demystify the whole notion that plans are static. A lot of people feel that, okay, you just create a plan once, and then that's it. No, plans are actually dynamic. So think about any team that's playing, right? So let's take football, for example. It could be the Super Bowl final, right? And as you're playing the game, you might start off first quarter with the plan of like, hey, we're going to just be throwing balls and, taking it to receivers. But as the game changes, you might change your plan to say like, okay, now let's just run the ball, or maybe let's play heavy defense and whatnot. Right. But the goal, the destination of winning the Super Bowl doesn't change. But as you go through quarter after quarter, the plan on how you're going to get there changes. So it's very dynamic with the plan. Now, how do you create a plan? There's so many ways you could do that. The first one is reverse engineering, right? So if someone else who's very successful and has also achieved fulfillment that it could be a famous person or someone close to you, has achieved what you're trying to achieve, just go learn what is it that they did and try to reverse engineer that process, right? In the book, I talk about James Jones, who won 3 basketball rings in the NBA, 2 with the Miami Heat and 1 with Cleveland Cavaliers. He came from a city in Miami where there were no professional basketball players. Like everybody in his neighborhood was playing football, but he wanted to play basketball. And the thing that he did was he looked at other players in the NBA that fit his style of play and kind of like looked like him in terms of physique. And he started reverse engineering what is it that they did that got them there. And then he just, created a plan based on that. Obviously, he made some tweaks based on his own uniqueness, but at least he had the framework of what he needed to do to become a professional basketball player which inevitably happened, right? So if you don't really know how to get there, reverse engineering is a good place to start. You can also work with a mentor, right? So if you're in business, you get an advisor, and mentors can really help you think through some of the things that you don't know, and also help you avoid mistakes that you probably would have made as you're going through it. And then if you don't have that, Google can be your best friend. Right now, we're living in an age that gives us an advantage more than any other age in history, right? We have access to so much information right at the tip of our fingers. So, there's so many ways where you can create a plan, but the important thing that you want to do is you want to create a plan, because some people might take the effort in understanding their purpose, but never take that step to actually sit down to say, like, okay, how am I going to achieve this, over the next 90 days, 1 year, 10 years, or whatever.
Right. That's the next step in the S.P.E.A.R method, and probably the most difficult one that not everyone takes. So it separates a lot of the doers from, maybe the watchers, the people on the sideline. How did you, let's take for an example, like with Nunbelievable, you say, okay, fulfillment's maybe lacking in my life. There's an area I want to work on and focus onto this business with a social responsibility to bring me more fulfillment. You have the why. Now you figured out the plan. How did you take that first step or series of steps to execute something as big as launching another business?
Yes. So one of the things about taking action is making sure that you feed your faith and starve your fear. Whenever you embark on accomplishing something big, there's an element of fear that usually approaches anybody. We're humans, right? So for Nunbelievable, for example, as we were planning what we're planning on doing, we said, hey, what if we could feed 1 million people in 2 years? Right? And it's like 1 million people. How are we going to do that? So obviously, if you've never done that before, there's a little bit of fear that strikes you. But if you feed your faith and starve your fear, you now get into a mindset where you can start really thinking like, okay, let's break this down. So yes, it's 1 million in 2 years. But if we were to start thinking about, okay, how many people do we need to feed in the first 30 days, in the first 90 days, and you start breaking it down into smaller chunks, it starts becoming attainable. In Africa, we like to say the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? If you try to eat the whole elephant at once, you're not going to finish it. It won't even fit in your mouth. But if you, one bite at a time, before you know it, over a period of time, the whole elephant is gone, right? So that's the first key thing about execution is like, yes, understand the big, hairy, audacious goal, but break it down into small milestones that get you there. So let me give you an example. So let's say you want to lose 100 pounds. If you're always thinking about, oh, I want to lose 100 pounds, oh, I want to lose 100 pounds, it might paralyze you from even taking action to actually go to the gym. But if you then say like, okay, I want to lose 100 pounds in a year. So in 4 quarters, I want to lose 100 pounds. It means that I need to lose 25 pounds per quarter, right? And then if you even divide that by 3, you need to lose about 8 pounds a month. So now instead of you focusing on, I want to lose 100 pounds, focus on, in 30 days, I need to lose 8 pounds. So now by just reframing what that goal needs to be, it changes, it takes away that fear factor. And now you can actually wake up and go and execute, because now you have a shorter milestone that you want to arrive at. And then once you hit that 8, you focus on the next 8, and then you focus on the next 8. But the key thing about achieving the results is you need to be consistent in taking action. So this is where the 8th wonder of the world comes into play. And what is the 8th wonder of the world? The 8th wonder of the world is compound interest. So a lot of people think about compound interest when it comes to finance, but compound interest actually works in action taking as well. Because the more small, consistent action steps you take every day, if you just do it consistently, over time, it will have an exponential growth, because you've been consistent. So if you go to the gym every single day, you're working out, you're eating right, you might not see the fat drop today, but over time, if you look 30 days later, there's that compound effect. So that's key in the formula, right? You just don't want to, eat a salad one day and think like, oh, I'm going to miraculously lose the 8 pounds. You're going to have to do it every single day for a consistent period of time, and then you'll start seeing the results.
It all adds up. It all adds up.
Exactly.
And in that chapter, compound interest was definitely the thing that after you've overcome the fear, it begins to be a little bit easier, or just you're more adjusted to it. But really just taking that first step, I felt this book provided me, simplicity around overcoming that initial fear, whether it was reaching out to, that ex-girlfriend you don't want to reach out to, whether it was reaching out to a family member, a brother that, you don't want to reach out to, whether it was going out and surfing a 7-foot wave and just getting absolutely demolished and feeling like you're literally about to die, being held under for 20 seconds. It was pretty gnarly. I came out with a different perception of fear after that. And it really is just a mind game, and people get stuck in that mind game. And I'm happy I can share that after reading this book. I feel like a new man. So I really do appreciate that. Now, execution, the compound interest, things when it was that first reach out to the family member to riding the wave seemed to be a lot easier after I'd done overcoming the fear after those small little points, right? Like you had mentioned. Now, achievement, taking the action. There is a little bit in there about persistence, and this was about your journey coming out of Zimbabwe. And I don't think we touched enough on that in this episode. Would you mind sharing with our audience kind of where you come from and your desire to get to the United States and have an education there?
Yeah. So what happened when I was growing up is that you've heard the adage that says curiosity killed the cat, right? But in my case, curiosity awakened the lion. So what I mean by that is that when I was about 10 years old, I was curious because I saw these kids my age who weren't going to school. So each morning I would pass them by, and I was just curious, like, are they homeschooled? Like, what's going on? How come they don't have to deal with like all of this? Because I would walk 2 miles each way, to get to school. Sometimes I'll take the bus coming home, but usually I'd walk 2 miles. So one day I decided to just go over to their house and just talk to them and just see like, hey guys, like, why is it that you guys don't go to school? So I learned that they were not going to school and they were not getting an education because their parents had passed away and they didn't have any money to pay for their education. Public education in Zimbabwe and a lot of the developing countries is, unfortunately, it's not free. So for me, I was just like, you know what? If the people in Zimbabwe can't really do something to make a difference, I need to make something of myself. And I think the best way to do it is let me leave to go to America, become super successful, and then leverage that success to make a difference. But there was a problem. I came from a lower middle class family, right? We were a single income household. My parents had 5 kids. So, just to feed the family and just take care of us, that was all, my dad could do. Now, later on, paying for an American education and whatnot, it was a little bit too much. But it was a dream that I passionately held, right? That was the big elephant that I had. And I had to figure out a way to do it. My parents were like, hey, if you want to go to America, figure it out. So after high school, when I graduated, I had to become resourceful because I didn't have the resources. Everybody around me would tell me the narrative of like, hey, Kuda, you're wasting your time. Things like this don't happen to people like us. We don't have the money. You can't afford, $40,000 a year in tuition. Like, unless if you get a full ride, there's no way this is going to happen. But it was because they were feeding their fear, right? I wanted to feed my faith and starve the fear that everybody had. And the first thing I did is I broke the goal down. Like, okay, I want to go to America. What do I need to execute on in order for me to get there? And the first thing was like, I need to take my SAT. I need to apply for the, for the schools, but I didn't have internet. So what did I do? Instead of looking at the lack of resource, not having internet, I decided to become resourceful. So I went to an internet cafe and I looked for a job. I was like, hey, I'll work for you guys, but I'll work night shift because you guys don't have a night shift. Let's open up more revenue for you guys, because I wanted to sleep in the internet cafe once I lock up and then use the internet. So that's what I did. So I would work from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. 11 p.m. would lock it all up. I would stay inside, and from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., I would be on the internet. I would be studying for my SATs. I would be, applying to colleges and whatnot. So that's how I was able to get the resource that I need, which was the internet, by being resourceful. Again, it was execution. So every day I was executing on it, and each day I was getting closer and closer and closer to my goal. The interesting thing that happened now, Kevin, is that my parents had asked me to apply to another school as a backup in Zimbabwe. And then the school gave me a place, they accepted me, and the funding was all figured out. So now I came to a point, and this is why I talk about having clarity on your why is super important. Because now I had this opportunity to go study engineering in Zimbabwe, but I knew that my purpose, my life's calling, was to be in America, right? So I don't like to negotiate with my goals. So I was like, there's no negotiation here, guys. I'm turning this down in order for me to pursue my calling. Everybody thought I was on drugs. I was crazy, because for them it was a no-brainer. It's like, hey, you have a place here. You can go to university in Zimbabwe. Forget about the American dream. I'm like, no, I'm going to forget about this path of least resistance, and I'm going to stay on course, because this is my calling. This is my purpose, and I have a plan to do that. So anyway, it took me 2 years from that day that I declined that opportunity to when I finally got on a plane to come to America for school. So I ended up being accepted at Lynn University in Boca Raton in their aviation and business program. They gave me a Dean scholarship. So it wasn't everything. It was 50% of what I needed. But luckily, someone who had been paying close attention to my journey, who had seen all the sacrifices that I had made, went out and took a loan and paid for my freshman year. And they said, like, hey, Kuda, we'll get you in for your freshman year, but you're going to need to figure out your sophomore, junior, and senior year. But we've seen how much this means to you. But more importantly, we're willing to invest in you, because we know that if we invest in you, we're investing in so many other people, because you're going to use this opportunity to provide opportunities for others. So the section in Achieve, right, which is the fourth step in the S.P.E.A.R method, really focuses on a mindset, which is your attitude will determine your altitude. So sometimes when you set out to achieve something, maybe you're only going to achieve 20%. But does that mean that you give up? Or you continue pushing until you hit 100%. So, it's super important for you to just have that laser focus in just continuing to execute until you achieve your desired result. And sometimes it might mean that you might need to collaborate with others. You might need to get other people to come in and help you. And I talk about different ways where I've been able to achieve certain goals through collaboration in the book. But I think the key thing, though, here is that you should always have a winning mindset. That should be part of your attitude, because once you have that within you, where you can reach in terms of altitude is going to be really, really high.
I wanted you to share that story because it's such an inspiring one. And, no matter what obstacles you faced, those obstacles became the way. Whatever comes in the way becomes the way. And another thing for me was I was reading this book on a Sunday. During that chapter, my neighbor had walked upstairs and I said, hey, Shelly, hey, happy Sunday. How you doing? She's like, happy Sunday. She's like, Kevin, every day feels like a Monday. why do you think so many people, like what are people missing the most about this COVID right now? There's a narrative out there. We're going to wait till the vaccine, wait, put your life on hold, wait till what are people missing during this time?
They're missing out on a lot. Like for me, I've used the opportunity to grow. Why? I did a calculation the day COVID hit and there was lockdown. I calculated the amount of time I was going to get back because of the life changes that were going to happen. And time is the most important resource. So for me personally, I gained 40 hours per week that I could use to pursue my goals. How did I get that? Through lack of commute. Because my office is in Manhattan. I live in New Jersey. It takes me an hour on the train to get to the office and an hour back. So it's 2 hours on a train. But now these 2 hours are now productive versus passive times, right? So before I used to listen to a podcast or read a book or whatever, but now I can actually work and do stuff and be productive. So for me, it was like, oh my God, I have literally created another work week within the same amount of time. So sometimes it's all about your perspective, right? Like, how are you looking at, the current situation? If you're always looking at it from a victim perspective, you'll miss out on the gold. So for me, the first thing I immediately did was like, okay, how can I actually work on leveraging this time to produce something with a value? And what ended up coming out of this was this. Because I used that time to actually work on refining my book, get ahead on schedule, and launch it on time. So right now, I think for people who are looking at it and say like, oh, we missed the good old times, blah, 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 when are things going to get back to normal? Well, what if this is the new normal, right? So you need to always have that willingness to adapt, to be flexible, and be liquid, right? Like a liquid. It fits into any container you put it in. So like, let's say water, right? It'll fit in within the shape. If it was a different shape, it'll also fit in. So I think that's the way we need to think about ourselves in life, is that one thing that's guaranteed in life is change. That's the only guarantee in life. So as if you know that things are always constantly going to change, you need to approach life with that type of flexibility so that when something disruptive like what just happened with COVID, you're able to react to it in a much more positive way. So what am I saying? I'm saying life will always deal you a hand. And sometimes it might not be the hand that you like, and sometimes it might be. But irregardless of the hand that you're dealt with, you're going to need to figure out a way to not only survive, but to thrive in any given environment.
Kuda, another thing I was thinking about was like, how does one stop themselves from like relapsing and going back to this? Like I found myself one day, gosh, I'd achieved all this progress, these last 2 weeks. And then I had one bad day, and that one bad day made me feel like I was a loser. Like I'm going to give up. Like it, even though it was just such a little thing, such as maybe not getting up on time and working out in the morning, like I'd set that goal for, it made me put so much more pressure on myself to do that. Like, how does one stop themselves from going back to their old selves and making sure that they're trying to continuously strive for this fulfillment?
So the way I'll answer this, Kevin, is I'll tell you what I do, and hopefully you can, extract from that and apply it to yourself. So what I do is I always remind myself every single day of my goals. So one business that I started with my wife, it's a personal development brand called This Is My Era. We have a 90-day planner. And each morning, part of my morning routine, and in the book, I talk about my morning routine. In the S.P.E.A.R Method, I talk about my morning routine, is I look at my goals and I plan my day once I know, once I remind myself and re-energize myself with my goals. The other thing that I do is, self-talk, that's the conversation we have the most, right? You talk to yourself more than you talk to anybody else because your mind is talking to yourself and things like that. So you need to control that narrative.
Interesting.
Because if you're telling yourself like, oh, I'm a loser, oh, I'm good for nothing, I'm an idiot, you're sinking that into your subconscious, right? And, when situations come, you're always going to be like, well, I'm a loser, and you miss out on the opportunity, right? So one of the things that I do so that I don't fall back to, the person I don't want to be, is I have a routine where I just have positive affirmations that I always tell myself. And it's all about reprogramming your subconscious so that the program that's playing is an empowering program, right? So yes, one day I might not wake up at 4 a.m. like I usually do. I'm not hard on myself. Just like, oh, you loser, you're worthless or whatever. It happens. I was tired or something happened. But I remind myself of my true identity, who I am. And I play that program of positive affirmations so that I'm reinforcing positive behavior. So I quickly get back on track, right? So that I'm not stuck in that rut for too long. So that's the other thing that I do is I make sure that I have a routine that always empowers, not disempower me, to make sure that I always get back on track. And then the other thing too is I read, right? When you read other people's stories, especially very successful people, it normalizes the equation, right? Because sometimes when you think of like, oh, this person who achieved all of this, you might think like they're superhumans or whatever. But when you start reading their stories and understanding some of the struggles that they've gone through, you'll be like, oh, wow. Like, this person overcome this and was able to achieve this. So it's another positive reminder to just say, like, at the end of the day, we're humans. But one of the things that I've learned is that our habits determine our destiny. So yes, you might, not do what you want to do every day, but if you stick with a habit that's positive, the destination where you're going to arrive at is going to be a much positive place than if you don't. So for example, if your habits are, and I'm just going to use a working out example because people can relate to this, but if your habits are working out, running, your destination is most likely going to be a six-pack. But if your habits are, going to McDonald's, eating junk food, being a couch potato and not doing anything, you're probably going to have a different destination, probably in the hospital, diabetes, or something like that, because of the habits that you have. So to answer your question in a nutshell is that have positive habits that will enable you to get you to the destination that you want to get to, so that when you hit that occasional hump, you're not stuck there, because the positive habits that you have every day will take you and pull you to that North Star.
It sounds so simple, but there's got to be people out there. All right, Kuda, bro. Easy for you to say, bro. Like, look at you, man. Like, what would you say to those people who, are maybe, struggling with those 10,000 thoughts per day, and are have never had a role model or influence in their life that have gone through those habits? I know, being around successful basketball coaches, growing up, and then in college, some professional athletes, that really had a major influence on my habits. What about those people who have never been around others who have a habitual process in their life?
Well, what I'll say to them is, you can do it, number one, right? Yeah. What life is really, Kevin, it's a series of choices. And regardless of what your faith is or whatever, but the gift that God gave us as human beings is the gift of choice, the will. We have will. Animals have instinct. We choose what we want to do. So just make the choice every single day to, even if it's 1% improvement over 365 days, that's 37x in improvement, because it's 1% over 1%. Remember compound interest we were talking about earlier. So that's that compounded effect. The beauty about this day and age, which I touched on earlier, is that you can get mentors online. What do I mean by that? You can just follow someone on social media and just read that positive content. So you make the choice. Do you want to be just following an Instagram, influencer who's just posting pictures of, them doing like, crazy stuff, or some people who are really posting content where you can learn? I'll give you an example. I follow a businessman called Strive Masiwa. He's a Zimbabwean businessman. He's done a lot of impact, and he's my role model. I've had the pleasure of meeting him once, but I don't have a personal relationship with him yet, where he's my mentor, right? But I read his blog post. I read his post on his Facebook, and I've learned so much about business, about strategy, about life, that he's my virtual mentor. So the answer I would tell that person is that, hey, the resources are there. Just think outside of the box, or just take yourself out of the rut that you're in, and just take small actions every single day that get you to where you need to be, but do it consistently. So don't just be inspired after this podcast, read one article, and then do nothing. You won't see the change. But if you then do it, every single day, it becomes a routine. You schedule it on your calendar, right? Then you start seeing the changes. So the changes that you want to see in your life, the first thing I'll tell you is look at your calendar and make sure you assign and give each single time slot a name. I'm going to be reading from 6 a.m. to 6:30. That's my schedule, right? My phone is off. I'm not doing anything, because if I don't schedule it in my calendar, it will never become a habit, right? From 5 a.m. to 5:45, I'm in the gym, I'm working out. So for me, it becomes easier to stay on course, because everything is scheduled in my calendar, even time for me to like hang out and, relax. So working on your calendar is something that I would say. And I just want to give a shout out to Leah McKenzie from Portland, Oregon, who says that she's really excited about this podcast. I'm excited about you listening, Leah. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Kuda, you mentioned God in that answer. Like, what role has religion or spirituality, faith, played in your existence, in your overcoming, in your progress?
For me, it's a big one, and I'm a Christian, and my father was a preacher when I was growing up. So I grew up in a very Christian family. And for me, it's really been super foundational in everything that I do. So it's played a very big role, and it continues to. And part of it has really helped me face the fears, right? Because there's that superpower that I'm always saying, like, hey, he's gonna help me, but for people, they have different religions or like faith perspectives, and it's fine. We're all humans at the same time. But for me personally, religion has played a huge role in my life, and it continues to.
Would you say it helps you maybe in staying grounded as well? I mean, once you do all these amazing feats, it's got to play some role in the ego in some way, shape, or form.
It humbles me.
So yes, speak about being humble, staying grounded. How does one do that?
Well, when I think of some of the things that have happened in my life, right? You quickly come to the realization that, yes, of course, I might have a role to play in this, but there was something bigger, right? From my perspective. So let's talk about the example that I shared about me coming to America. So remember, I had turned down that opportunity. I had a 50% scholarship to come to the US. If I didn't get that other 50%, There was no way I was going to get a visa, no way I was going to come here. But somehow, someone, got it in their heart to go and take a loan. Think about it. They went and took a loan on my behalf to pay for what I needed. Now, I didn't like go on bended knees or like doing it. Like they just knew what I was doing. And they were like, hey, you know what? Let's do it for this guy. And I can tell you stories and stories like that where, things have just happened. I'll tell you one right now. So while I was working on building Crockpot Cuisine, it was a meal delivery business under the Crockpot brand. We had launched it. We had acquired thousands of subscribers into our funnel, but the business wasn't as big as we had hoped it to be. So I was actually given an ultimatum from senior management that, hey, Kuda, if you don't figure this out in the next like 30 to 60 days, we're gonna have to cut this project, and you probably have to work on other things. And I remember that day I was so down because it's like a baby, right? Like someone telling you like, hey, we're gonna sacrifice your baby, and something just said, go back to your alma mater, to Lynn. They have a CEO speaker series. Just go there and just have a different vibe or whatever. So I get there, and the gentleman that I met who was speaking there, his name is Stephen Crane. He started a couple of frozen food businesses, and I'm just listening to him. I'm like, oh my God, this is the guy I need to talk to, right? He's kind of like in the food space. He has a lot of experience, and I didn't even know that he was speaking there. Long story short, I end up connecting with him after the meeting, and he introduces me to Omaha Steaks. I end up doing a deal with Omaha Steaks, and it's just like events like that where like you can't really explain, like, I'd never gone to these like speaker series, even,
it's crazy,
when I was still in school, unless if it was mandatory. But this one time when I needed this one person that would connect me to this big company that would then transform the entire initiative, like, how would you explain that? People have different, explanations. They can say karma and whatnot. For me, I see it as grace, right? It's just grace from the men above that then opens up these doors for me. And then when people look at it, it's like, oh, look at this amazing thing that you created. Was it really me? Or I'm just a vessel who was just an obedient steward to actually say like, okay, let me go to this place, let me meet this person, let me follow up, and ultimately this amazing, great feat happens. So it's an interesting way to look at things, I think.
Do you think people deep down like really understand and know like what they need to do? Like, for instance, when you had your why and you had the choice between going to Zust, the technology college in Zimbabwe, versus going to the States, and you got in, you gave your father a call and you said, Dad, I'm going to go to Zust. And then you started talking about it. And then I don't know, you can tell the story, but I remember you reading, like, you hung up the phone, you went back and you said, I'm not going to Zust. So like, do you believe people really, when it comes down to it, understand what they need to do?
I think to some extent, in the hearts of hearts, we all know what the right thing is. Like you hear a lot of people saying, follow your gut. What does that mean, right? It means somewhere, somehow, there's that inner you that really knows what your North Star is. So to talk about the scene you were talking about, it kind of like reminds me of the Wolf of Wall Street, right? When he went to say to his folks, like, hey, I'm going to quit. I'm no longer going to do this. And then he goes like, I'm not going anywhere. So it was literally the same thing with me, right? Where I called my parents, and it was me trying to say like, hey, I'm going to follow this Zimbabwean university thing, because I'd actually gone to the school to register. And while I was there, I was like, is this really what I need to do? So then I end up calling my dad, and I'm telling him like, yeah, everything is good. Everything is well. And then it just kind of like, it's like, Kuda, this is your moment. You have to do it. It's now or never, right? And it was kind of like an interesting thing, which is, imagine in that moment if I was not bold enough to quit. And if I had stayed in Zimbabwe, right, we probably wouldn't be on this podcast, right? Or I probably wouldn't have been able to achieve some of the things that I've achieved. Like, for instance, we've sent hundreds of children to school in Africa through some of the initiatives that we've done. We fed hundreds of thousands of people meals through Nunbelievable. None of that would have been possible if in that moment, if I had had cold feet. But they say that fortune favors the bold. And in that moment, I was bold enough to be all chips in, put everything on the table. And I was like, you know what, Dad? In fact, I'm coming home. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I need to be focusing on figuring out a way on how I need to make it work for me to come to America. So I'm coming home tonight. I can imagine his reaction when he hears me say it. But credit to my dad, he was like quiet for a little bit. And then he was like, Kuda, if that's what you want to do, Mom and Dad support you. Come home. Let's figure this out. And I went back on the train, and 2 years later, I was on my way to America.
Let's talk about moms and dads right now for a second while we're on this topic. We talked about fear and like seeing the elephant, but eating the elephant, piece by piece, bite by bite, one bite at a time. Is it more difficult for mothers and fathers, people who are now in a more secure position, to take a larger risk? Like, is it more difficult for people further in their careers? You just mentioned I might not be here today. Is it more difficult for those people to make a change in their lives and pursue something different in their career toward fulfillment? Or is that just maybe an excuse, in a light term, to not take a risk?
Well, I think, Kevin, to be fair, I think we need to first understand what is it, right? What is the risk that they want to take? But naturally one would be inclined that when you have more things at stake, right, it's going to take a lot for you to take a risk. So, for example, I'm not a parent yet. So there are certain risks that I can take because it's really my wife and I that, we just need to consider, like, okay, what does it mean for us? But when we have kids, right, it's now more at stake. We're responsible for another life. We might not be willing to take, aggressive risks because, it's not really about us anymore, right? It's about this individual or these individuals that we have to look after. So I think any risk that you need to take, you have to assess it against the return and also against the impact of, like, hey, if things don't work, right? Because yes, at some point in time, this is the thing that you need to go. But if it doesn't work, you could be homeless and your kids can experience, a totally different life because of that risk. That might, stop people from doing it. So it's, the way I like to look at it is like, the sooner you actually start working on pursuing your purpose, the much easier it is down the road because you don't have to deviate course anymore, right? So if you wait until your 40s to now start working on your purpose, number one, you don't have that much time to actually, work on it anymore, right? If you use kind of like life expectancy as a timeline, because now instead of you having like 40 years to work on it, now you only have like, 25 years to work on it or something. But also number two, there are more people involved in your decision making. If you have 2 kids, 4 kids, whatever, now you have to understand, your role as a parent and how that plays into their dreams, right? Because then maybe, the reason why you wouldn't pursue it is to make sure that you set them up for success. And as parents, those are some decisions that you have to make. So, I do agree with the thinking that as you get older, it becomes more difficult because now you have more variables that you need to consider. But when you're younger, you can take a little bit more risks. But it doesn't mean that as you get older, don't take any risks. You should do an assessment and really see what's good for you and your situation before you actually take that action.
And I think it's what you said earlier too. It's like just that it's that perception of kind of where you are in terms of taking that risk. So like, someone who starts a podcast when they're young, like myself, I felt that I didn't have any experience whatsoever. And that's what made it so difficult for people maybe listen to this, say, oh, I want to start a podcast. You have all that experience. It's just kind of how you perceive and look at that. So maybe it's different for different types of strategies and obstacles that people face. But all of this to say is we've gone through seeking our why. We've gone through planning, executing, achieving. The last step of the S.P.E.A.R method is repeat. How does one repeat? What do you mean by that? And are you going to repeat another book?
So let's start with the last part. Your best book is your next book.
Ooh.
That's something that an author with 15 books told me. So I wouldn't rule out another book. It's not confirmed yet, but I wouldn't rule it out. To talk about the repeat phase, I'll ask you a question. How are you staying alive right now?
How am I staying alive right now? Just
it's because you're breathing, right?
Yeah.
You have to take another breath, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order for you to stay alive. If you stop breathing right now, regardless of whatever, but if you literally stop breathing right now, I can guarantee you what the outcome will be 10 minutes from now. If you stop breathing.
I don't know, man. I've been taking Wim Hof's breathing exercises, so for quite some time.
So let's say like an hour from now, right? Because I'm not sure if Wim Hof will get you to an hour. But the key point I'm trying to say there is that you cannot survive, on your last breath. You can't say like, oh, because I took a breath 15 minutes ago, I don't need to breathe again. So it's the same thing with, pursuing your purpose, right? You can say like, oh, because I exercised or I did this, a week ago, I don't need to work on this anymore. You have to continuously plan, execute, achieve, in order for you to get to your purpose. So the beauty is in the journey, and you have to continue taking the journey. You're going to see a lot of amazing landmarks and milestones you're going to achieve, but the important thing is stay on course. Right? Celebrate the milestone you'll hit, but don't do it for years and years. You're just celebrating a success, right? I graduated more than 10 years ago, right? Should I still be going out celebrating that I graduated with my bachelor's degree? No, I have to move on, right? I have to focus on other goals. I have to take another breath in order for me to survive. So that's the whole thinking around repeat, right? It's repeat the things that took you to get to your milestone, right? Remember, the way you're going to eat an entire elephant is one bite at a time. So when you take that bite, chew it, digest it, and repeat the process. Take the next bite, chew, digest, and so forth, because that's the only way you're going to eat the elephant. So the whole repeat stage is really centered around that notion. The elephant is your purpose, but plan, execute, achieve are the bites that you're taking. So in order for you to then eat the entire elephant, you have to repeat that process of, eating one bite at a time.
Kuda, let's wrap this up. Last words, pieces of advice for people listening to this out there who want to make a change in their life. What would you say to them?
So two things. So the first thing is that there are 3 important days in any life. In your life, my life, anybody and the days are the day you're born, because you're now gracing us with your presence on earth. The day you find out your purpose, right? The day you find out why. We're talking about the importance of that first step of the S.P.E.A.R method. But the third day is each day you act on your why. So just make sure that every single day you're taking some action in achieving your why. So the 3 days in life, the 3 most important days in life are the day you're born, the day you find out why, and each day you act on your why. And then the second thing is, do not be afraid to not only dream big, but to actually take the action to achieve those big dreams. When I was in Zimbabwe and dreaming about coming to America, it was the impossible dream. people would tell me that, hey, what you're trying to do, it's impossible. It doesn't happen to us. But because I was crazy enough to have that as a dream, number one, but also number two, even crazier to actually take the action to do it, that's why I'm here today. I could have easily just said, like, yeah, you know what, you guys, you're right. Why am I even wasting time having this crazy dream? Let me be practical. Let me be realistic, and I would probably be living a totally different life. An interesting story I'll share with you real quick is that I went to Zimbabwe. I left Zimbabwe in 2005, and I didn't get to go back home until like 2012. So it took me about 7 years before I went back home. So the whole time I was in college, I never went back home because I just didn't have the money to do that. When I went back home 7 years later, my friends, or quote unquote, the friends who used to tell me, like, hey, what you're trying to do is impossible, you're crazy, don't do it. I went back and they were sitting at the same stoop doing the same things that I left them 7 years ago doing. The only difference that had happened was that they had just become older. So dream big and be bold enough to take action to achieve those dreams. Because if you don't take action, you will be at the same stoop doing the same thing 7, 10, 15 years from now. So that would be the piece of advice I would share.
Got to deposit more action. Seems like those old friends were building up on that compound interest, Kuda. Hey, thank you for sending the book, my friend. It was an amazing read. I had such a great time devouring these 176 pages. We're going to have you stick around for some questions after this show. If we have any guests, again, folks, just enter in the chat box, Kuda, your questions for after the show. But for Kuda Biza, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, act on your why every day. And always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Kuda.
Thank you.
All right, good people listening on LinkedIn and on Crowdcast. Let's give it up. Let's give it up for Kuda. Well done, my friend. Again, from the heart, it was an amazing read. I'm going to share it with a lot of my friends and family members. You feel like you know someone when you interview them one time on the show, and then you read their full story and you get to know more about them. So that's what I find so cool about this podcast. Looking forward to your success, your future, and following you along the way. Let's bring in some questions now. We've got 5 people listening live right now. If you have any questions, folks, just type them in the chat box. I'll just kind of start us off. How is the family doing right now during this time? And then also, one of the things that I found so fascinating in the book is the hyperinflation in Zimbabwe that was going on. Maybe explain to people, give them some context of what's going on in Zimbabwe with the economy and with their family.
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of background. So a lot of countries in Africa, were colonized, right? And usually during independence, they would have agreements, right? That would have to be signed for that independence to happen. So Zimbabwe had what was called the Lancaster House Agreement, because it was signed in London at the Lancaster House and whatnot. And part of the clause in the Lancaster House Agreement, I don't know all the details, but it was around the notion of the United Kingdom was going to pay for land redistribution, because 95% of the arable land was owned by white minorities, while the black majority only had 5%. So you had 3% of the population owning 95% of the land, and then 97% of the population only owning 5% of the land. So that was 1980 when Zimbabwe got independence. And then, by 1990, nothing had really happened with regards to that. So 10 years later, by year 2000, still nothing had really happened. So when, President Mugabe was working on trying to get that clause to be enacted, I'm not really sure what the details happened. But what I do know is he just came back to Zimbabwe and he just told people, go get the farms. Now, our inflation at the time was already bad because Zimbabwe had gone into a war with into the Congolese war.
Right, right.
So because of that, resources were being taken to go fund that war. And what that led to, it led to obviously inflation. Money that was supposed to be invested into the productivity of the country was being used to fight a war. So when the land grabs started happening, the US and the UK imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. And that just put us in a spiral. Like, I remember reading something saying that the inflation rate was around 2 million%. People, and these are anecdotes, I wasn't in Zimbabwe when this was happening, but people would go to a restaurant and the price of your meal would go up while you're eating.
Oh my gosh.
So that's how crazy it was, right? So these are some of the anecdotes that people were sharing. But it was crazy because if you think about it, in the West, we complain of 3% inflation. If it's 100%, it's mayhem, right? Because 100% inflation means that if this pen was $1 today, a year from now, it would be $2, right? It's 100% inflation. In Zimbabwe, it was 2 million% inflation. So if this is $1 today, next year, the price would be by a factor of 2 million. So you just do the math.
Right.
So because of that, it really became a very tough environment for people to live. Unemployment was through the roof, in the high 90 percentile of people who could get a job, couldn't get a job. And it really just affected the country. Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of Africa. Right. We were producing and a lot of agricultural production and actually exporting to other countries. But, the economy is now very, very, it's beat up. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in fixing that. And, part of it is going to take people like myself to figure out a way where we can reinvest and empower people. And the way that I've been doing it is really primarily through education. We pay for the tuition of people who can't afford, primarily orphans, to go to school, because you need an educated population who can then kind of come in. Like, you need that generation to be educated to come in and really start solving the problems. But if the people are not educated, it will be very difficult. So that has been my focus in making a difference in Zimbabwe.
That's incredible. So recap real quick. You say Zimbabwe's inflation comes from funding the war, printing too much money to fund and resources for this war, as well as land redistribution. Okay.
Yeah, and then sanctions that came as a result of the land redistribution. So it's obviously a series of events. Right. But think of it, right? So like if like Zimbabwe, right, for example, we would trade with the UK and the US primarily. And if they stop purchasing from you, and you're playing on an international field, and you don't have the foreign currency to buy things, like you need to buy oil in US dollars and so forth and so forth, but you can't sell your production to get the US dollars, your currency is worthless and you don't have anything, right? And the balance of trade is at a deficit because you're producing but nobody's buying. So that was the issue. And because if nobody's buying, you can't pay the people who've worked. And if those people don't have any money, they can't go buy goods in the store. So it becomes this whole cycle,
right,
where like, it just affects the economy. So Zimbabwe has gone through like a very tough time. It's still it's very tough still now, but 2008 was bad. It was the worst time ever. Like, you'd go into a supermarket and you'd find nothing. Every shelf in the store was empty. You can Google the images online. But they're a resilient group of people. They've figured out how to be resourceful, and people survive. My parents still live there, and they figured out a way.
Incredible. Jeez, you just learn something new every day. It was something I was interested in because I had been studying about blockchain, and one of the major cases for blockchain is that you won't have the hiccup with government miscontrol of spending money and sanctions and things like that on a distributed ledger that's not controlled by government fiat. So anyway, I can pick your brain about that later. But we've got a question coming in here from, we've got one from Madeline and one from Noah. Noah asks, what advice would you give to your younger self?
None.
None.
Because I would want my younger self to go through that experience and journey and figure things out. Because if you think about it, right now, you know, the Kuda I am today and the Kuda in 2030, you know, I wouldn't want any advice because I want to attack the situations head on and figure things out, you know, through that. Because, you know, there's beauty in the journey and overcoming things, right? Not saying I wouldn't take any advice from mentors, but for me, myself, to kind of like give myself advice, I wouldn't want to do that. It feels like cheating in a sense, I think. So I wouldn't tell younger Kuda anything. I think younger Kuda was able to figure it out along the way and navigate, and now I'm here. So that would be my answer for you, Noah.
I love it. I love it. Malin asks, what are some of the best habits you've implemented into your daily routine?
Telling my wife I love her every single day. Happy wife, happy life. But from a personal development perspective, I'm a big believer that if you win the morning, you win the day. So my morning routine just gets me help. It helps me get started for the day, but more importantly, it then sustains me, right? So, for example, I make sure like when I wake up, I don't really go to my phone first. I have a whole routine that I do. So, you know, exercising, time for silence and meditating, read the Bible, pray. I work out, and, you know, the cold showers that you were talking about earlier, and then do some breathing exercises with Wim Hof, plan my day, and really just, you know, take some time to really look into my agenda. What are the things that I want to achieve, and make sure that those things are scheduled in my calendar. And then I start my day. So by the time I start, I have energized myself from the workout, and I have mental clarity from the breathing exercises. And by taking the cold shower, it enables me to do something that's hard and win. So now I have that on my back to say like, hey, I've done something challenging and I've won. And it just sets the tone for the day. I feel a difference, especially when I'm traveling, when I don't really do my morning routine because I don't really show up. I feel like, you know, so for me, I think the morning routine is the most empowering thing that I do. So I really encourage people to find a routine that works for them.
It's great advice, and I feel like after those cold showers and those breathing exercises, it's a whole new me. I have a whole new type of energy, and it's almost 2 days worth of energy compared to where I was, you know, a couple of weeks prior. So, Kuda, that's it from the questions today on the Real Leaders Podcast. Thanks again for coming on. Where can people find more information about your book?
Yeah, so they can go to S.P.E.A.R Method.com, and on S.P.E.A.R Method.com, you know, they can find information about me, about my book. They can connect with me there. If you're more like into social media, you can find me on Instagram, Kuda Biza, Kudabiza. I didn't have an Instagram up until like a few months ago. My team had been begging me like, hey, Kuda, you need to be a little bit more visible here.
Get off.
So I've started to embrace social media, and I'm still learning. So, you know, feel free to connect with me there. But yeah, those are the places where you can connect with me and learn about all the amazing things that I'm doing.
One of the things your book helped me do is to get off social media. So I'm going to give you a forewarning now, brother. Don't get on it.
Well, it depends how you do it, right? I get a little bit of help with my social media as well. So I try to be very planned and strategic around how I use it, and when I'm there and when I'm not there, and other people come in to help. So I'm learning as I go and figuring out a process that helps me become efficient on the platforms.
Well said. Spoken like a true wise author you are of the S.P.E.A.R Method. 5 simple steps to balance success and fulfillment. Kuda, thank you so much for sending this over. Great speaking with you as always. And best of luck down the line.
Thank you. Happy holidays. And listen, I would like to give away 3 copies of my book to any lucky winner. So I'll let you, Kevin, figure out how you're going to do it. Just send me the email with their names and addresses, and I'll send the copies over to them. So it's a gift I want to give to the Real Leaders platform and to your community and the people that are listening in. And if they found anything valuable from what we discussed, and they would really love to read the book, 3 copies up for the grabs. I'll let you, Kevin, and the team figure out how you figure out the winners.
Wonderful. We'll do a little giveaway in an email after this, send that message to everyone, and make sure we wish everyone a happy holidays and Merry Christmas. So, Kuda, appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and thank your wife for lending you for an hour here.
Will do. Take care, man.